Hello again, folks, and welcome to the next episode, which I believe is episode 14 of Dharma Outreach, Dharma Talks. I'm obviously here again, unfortunately for you guys. Marshall's with me today, and we're lucky enough to have our special guest today, Mr. Justin Otto. So, Justin, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
It's very good of you to give your time up for us. Well, I'm going to kind of kick off in the same way I always kick off, and ask you, Justin, how basically how you came to first find an interest in the Dharma.
I would say that I came to this path like pretty much everybody else comes to this path, and my one word answer would be suffering. Um, I actually came to the Dharma while I was incarcerated in 2014. I was I'm a recovered heroin user, and I found myself in jail for the first lengthy stay ever. Um, I had never really done much jail time, and so I went from doing like really no jail time. I would not to say that I didn't get arrested because I sure did, but I would always bond out and handle it from the outside. This time I didn't have that option, and I found myself looking at a 25-year minimum mandatory sentence and sitting there with no bond and losing my ever loving mind. So yeah, I figured I needed something to do, and I started just kind of perusing the bookshelves, and I came across a book called "We're All Doing Time" by Bo Lozoff, and he was kind of part of that whole Ram Dass, Stephen Levine, early '70s spiritual movement. You know, everybody went to India and ate a bunch of acid and came back, and they all had gurus, and right. So I found this book, and it gave like some basic yoga asanas and some anapanasati techniques, and I just started meditating. And in the book, it said, you know, treat this time while you're incarcerated like it's your ashram or your monastery, and that's what I did. And I kind of sat through that year and kind of got my feet wet with the practice. I didn't really get into the Dharma itself until a couple of years later, probably 2016, but it really didn't sink in for me until about 2018. That's when it was like, and that's kind of when things started to take off for my practice.
That's great. Thank you so much. Um, Marshall, have you got anything to say on that? Since
I do have something to say about that. Is I found that same book, We're All Doing Time by Bo Lozoff and Sita, and I ended up writing them. And I used to get their newsletter, and that was a huge contributor to my interest in Eastern philosophies. And I tried the practices and the hatha, yoga, and meditation and such. And yeah, it started me on that path. And something else interesting I'll mention is I connected with them since I've been home from prison, and I'm connected with their new CEO, their executive director, and she's really cool too. So I can definitely connect you with her at the end of
Oh,
the
very
show.
cool. Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody about you earlier, Marshall, and I was like, yeah, he's kind of like the Massachusetts version of me.
Albeit a little bit heftier.
Right.
I think it's always interesting for folks to hear the stories about how we came to this practice. And I mean, I'm not going to bore everyone with my complete story for sure, but my story is pretty unique. I mean, I left Thailand after a very lucky not guilty verdict, and wasn't on any kind of spiritual quest. Although I had a meditation practice at the time, but I certainly didn't go to Thailand with any intentions of ordaining or living in a monastery. That's for sure. In fact, I was asked 3 times if I would ordain. So I think it's always interesting the way we kind of come to this. Um, and also I think where we go when we've actually found some of the teachings. Um, I don't make any great secret about the fact that I don't hold too much store in folks that um, kind of use it to run away from the world, i.e., spending the rest of their lives in monasteries or temples. I don't have a great issue with those folks, but I have an issue with the practicality of that. And I think that all depends on where we're coming from as individuals. Certainly, I take a very unorthodox kind of although I took a very orthodox path for 8 years. I lived in Thailand for 11 years, and for 8 of those years, I lived in a Thai forest there. So, yeah, I think it's interesting how we come to it. And Justin, if I can ask, how do you find the practicalities of the teachings to be maybe more beneficial is the word, than some of the more ritualistic and ceremony based stuff?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. You know, I think they say in the 12-step rooms, if it's not practical, it's not spiritual, and I kind of took that to heart. And that's what really drew me to the teachings, is they are very practical. It's just like, here, if you want to live a better life, just follow this path, follow these steps, get your sila in order. That will help your samadhi, and the samadhi will lead to panya. And that's kind of my story. It was like, all right, well, I need to get my life together, because when I was sitting to meditate, you know, like I said, I found meditation in 2014. I didn't officially get off of drugs until 2018. So I was still meditating, but all the kind of questionable ethical stuff that I was doing was always the first stuff to come up when I would sit. So it was really important to get my sila in order, you know, my morality, my ethics, in order to really further my sitting practice and get my samadhi to the place where I feel it's in a good position.
That's especially interesting for me, Justin, because I've had a meditation practice of sorts now for about 40 years, actually. But certainly in the first half of that, I was certainly in active use, and people would I would go on one of my wanting to tell everyone about Buddhist teachings and meditation, while everyone around me was laughing and said, "Yeah, that's okay while you're sitting there causing no one any trouble, but half hour later you're running around like you had your hair's on fire." That was when I had hair. But I found that all the benefit of that in the past came to fruition, certainly in the first 4 years. And it was extreme, obviously. I mean, I'm in Thailand and decided, or was asked, if I wanted to go live in a forest, basically. But all the time that people were telling me I was wasting my time kind of came to fruition, certainly in those first 4 years. After the first 4 years, I had issues because they were service issues. They were service issues, which led me to arrive in Chicago after 8 years living in the Thai forest. But it's interesting that you say that you had this meditation practice while you were in active use, because I did for a long time. And I guess the message there is that you know, however bad we think our practice might be at any one time, at least we're practicing. Yeah, for sure. So, Justin, I really don't know much about you back then. Did you work with folks that are in recovery now?
Yes, I do.
Right.
I do.
Okay.
I work as a recovery coach, and I also facilitate a meditation sitting group here in town, and that brings in a lot of people that are in recovery. You know,
Heck,
I don't necessarily bill it as a recovery group, but I don't think I have to because, I really feel that the whole of the Dharma is about recovery from addiction.
absolutely. I'd agree with you absolutely. Although we don't see, we might not actually see the word addiction written in Pali translations. There's plenty of mentions of it by plenty of other names. So yeah, I quite agree with you.
Right.
Do you find that people take to a dharmic and loosely Buddhist based approach to recovery quite well?
I do, and I think that the reason for that is because it works. You know, we're talking about a 2,600-year-old recovery program. The efficacy is there. That's I don't know if you have any experience in the 12-step rooms, but it's not the same. It's not the same vibe at all. People feel more at ease, I think, with this path to recovery than they do with the 12-step rooms. And what other thing that I kind of disagree, I mean, I'm a member of a 12-step program, but I still disagree with the aspect of self-identifying as an addict. For me, from a Buddhist and from a Dharma perspective, addiction is something that has happened to me. It's not something that I am. It's something that I have experienced. It's a learned behavior, which means that it can be unlearned. So it's kind of my take.
I think that's interesting. I've never worked. I mean, most people know. I've never worked the steps that didn't work for me when I was younger and in the UK, and therefore, I obviously don't discount it for other people, but it's certainly not for me.
So yeah, so I really vibe with that, and like that's something I noticed is. Within like that path of development, and like we see a lot of people in recovery. Justin, I'm sure you see a lot of different people at different stages of recovery, and I look at it like self-development and working in this field of health and recovery. It becomes like something that people expect from you, because the whole peer support model, like people, you got to relate to people, and people want to understand what your experience was and what gives you that little edge in helping other people. And I'm getting to that point where it was important when I started doing this work. I was trained to do this work, educated to do this work. I have the life experience, so I understand what somebody else is going through when they're experiencing drug addiction. But I think at some point along that path of development where you've gotten far enough away from that addictive behavior, that you don't want to identify with that, and I've been feeling that a lot lately, and I see a lot of people will get stuck in that mode of thinking and cycling, and then I ask myself the question of, if you continue to identify with like some of like the worst part of your experience or your life, like are you just holding yourself back from jumping into that next stage of life, that next stage of self-development? What do you think about that?
I think so. I think you're definitely holding yourself back. And you use the phrase getting away from the addiction, but we never truly get away from addiction. We just get away from the addiction to harmful substances. Human beings are addicts at heart. We cling to pleasure, we push away from pain. That's what we do. If people get bored, they pick up the cell phone, or they turn on the TV, or they look for any kind of distraction to distract them from the present unbearable moment. But from a Buddhist perspective or from a Dharma perspective, where everybody's an addict, everybody's addicted to something.
That's very
But
accurate.
to answer the original question, I do feel like, yes, that is a setback. I do feel like self-identifying as an addict keeps you in the mindset of being an addict, and it hinders your progress, for lack of a better way to put it.
I mean, I certainly find from we speak at various different detoxes, etc., etc. And usually to folks that are in very, very early recovery. And I certainly find a lot of interest in find folks have a lot of interest in something they see as quite an alternative to the more established recovery programs, which is, I think, quite a, I mean, it's obviously a good thing. Kind of surprises me a bit when I talk with folks who have not been, who are not aware of any Dharma-based recovery programs, because they've been out there for a while now. So I'm kind of surprised about how new this is to people. I don't know. Do you find that, or do you find that a lot of people are aware?
I don't think as many people are aware as I would like there to be. Especially, I'm in Florida. I'm in the panhandle of Florida in Pensacola, so I'm very much in the deep south. And there's I do get a lot of pushback from, for lack of a better way to phrase it, Bible Belt type entities. There's a lot of pushback because it is Buddhism, and they're like, oh, they view it as, because Buddhism is classified as a religion, which, at its core, it's really just cognitive behavioral therapy if we want to get right down to the brass tacks of it. But because of that, I get a lot of pushback against some of the hardliners in the 12-step groups. But also some of those people, think that the 12-step model is the only thing that works, and I just don't think that's the case.
No, absolutely. I mean, and in fact, unfortunately, I've found that I've certainly got more pushback from the Buddhist establishment than I have from anywhere else. But I think that says a lot about me personally, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it's like so much like pushback. It's just like they just neglect. Like they neglect. It's like they're not interested. That was our experience. But as far as like, that brings back my experience of when I was younger. That was all I was ever offered, was the 12 steps. Now being like recovery coach trained and learning like this whole new model that they're putting out there with like the multiple pathways. We meet people where they're at, which means we have to find what's going to work best for them, whatever that might be. Like there's so many different options. But you're right. I notice a lot of times people just aren't aware. They're not aware that there's so much out there, including like the Dharma recovery, smart recovery, a lot of like the psych and science-based stuff. And then just kind of like, they obviously have moderation management now, like, which is part of smart recovery. Some people will attach to that. I personally don't recommend it, especially, depending on how severe the issue is. But there's so much out there, and yeah, it's predominantly most people only know the 12 steps. That's all they can relate to, until somebody like myself or Justin like you or Sujatu, who's now a trained recovery coach, can introduce them to all these different options that they have available to them to improve their life. Whereas the introduction I was given was like, hey, this is like a punitive, kind of very strict thing that you got to do. And then 16-year-old me was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not interested.
I think it's, for me, I make no secret of the fact that I'm very, very big on multiple pathways and on harm reduction. For me, the way I see it, and I'm not, I got to say, I'm not trained in this field. Apart from I have got a recovery coach certificate, but other than that, I'm not really trained in the field. Do I work in the field? I guess I kind of do, but not, only from the outreach work that we're doing with Dharma Outreach. But I'm very big on multiple pathways and on harm reduction. Perhaps I see things too simply. I probably do. For me, the number one thing is to try and connect folks with resources to keep them alive, because dead folks don't do well in recovery. So whatever that individual may need to get there, I don't have any issues with. That's why I do have issues with folks that say that this is the only way. They usually say it with the best intentions because it's worked for them. It's worked for them, and that's cool. But fact of the matter is, each one of us are completely individuals. Yes, we have similarities. Yes, we have similar things that work for us. But each of us are a standalone entity as well as a part of a whole, and I think it's important for us to realise that. And yeah, I do have issues when, when something is being pushed as the answer, because it's far more complicated than that. But and although I never worked a Buddhist-based program to get sober, because it wasn't about. I first got involved with refugee recovery in Thailand, when they had a meeting in Thailand, which was, I think, it was very soon after. It was very soon after the book was published, the meeting started. But certainly, I think part of my passion for it, and the reason I left Thailand after 11 years was, I think undoubtedly I prefer to use Dharma rather than Buddhism, because I'm really not keen on that ism. But it's safe to say that it kept me alive and out of prison, which is a pretty big result, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I also tend to lean more towards using the term the Dharma rather than Buddhism, because I feel using the term Buddhism is kind of exclusionary, and the Dharma is a non-sectarian practice. Like, you don't have to be a Buddhist to practice the Dharma and have it benefit your life. And that's one thing I'm really big on letting people know right from the jump. Is like, you don't have to necessarily self-identify as a Buddhist to benefit from these teachings. So.
We're obviously thinking very much along the same lines, because I'm very much the same. Very much the same. In fact, although I've taken part in Buddhist religious ceremonies, certainly in Thailand, and I don't have anything against them, but that was never my thing. It was the practicality of the teachings and the benefit that the benefit that folks could get from it. To be honest with you, whether people had lit the right amount of candles or were burning the right amount of sticks of incense was absolutely of no interest to me whatsoever, and it still isn't. Which kind of doesn't make me very popular with the Buddhist establishment, but that's another story. Right. I usually go on a rant once for a couple of minutes on these recordings, and I'm trying not to do it this time, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, I agree with you. I couldn't care any less about any of the proper amount of candles or the right, none of that matters to me. First of all, I'm a lay practitioner to begin with, and I'm about the efficacy of the program. I'm about the boots on the ground, like happiness in the here and now, and I just don't concern myself with any of the falderall, so to speak.
That is very that's very heartwarming for me to hear, personally, on a personal level, because that's always been my spin on it. Has always been it's the practicalities, not the ritual and ceremony.
So, Justin, I know you're very active out there. I know you're doing a lot of stuff. Tell us some of the stuff you got going on and some of the stuff you got planned for the future. We'd love to hear it.
Let's see. Right now, as I said, I facilitate a sitting group here. I was trained to facilitate groups through Wild Heart Meditation Center in Nashville under Reverend Mikey Noshel and Andrew Chapman. They're both amazing. If you haven't checked out Wild Heart Meditation Center, you can go to their website, wildheartmeditationcenter.org, and check out what they've got going on. As I said, they're based out of Nashville. I'm in Pensacola. Here, I facilitate Gulf Coast Dharma. It's a Dharma-based sitting group, basically. It is your standard sitting group. There's about a 20 to 30-minute Dharma talk, a sitting meditation, guided sitting meditation, generally Vipassana, Anapana, or one of the Brahma Vihara meditations, and then a discussion period. As I said, I also work as a recovery coach at a Mindful Living Retreat Center here in Pensacola. And I volunteer for Flowering Lotus Meditation. That's based out of Mississippi. It's a floating retreat entity. So we rent out retreat locations, bring in teachers, and then basically charge just what it costs to rent the center and pay for the food, and bring people in and expose them to the practice and expose them to the retreat setting and noble silence. And I've been doing that since the summer. I just started with them in the summer, but it's been going good, and I think we're going to get Sujatu in to do a little weekend online retreat for us, so that'll be fun. Got some half-day retreats I'm planning in the future. I don't have any dates set for that right now. I have been empowered to teach half-day retreats right now. I'm still working towards full empowerment, but it'll come when it comes, if it does come. And I'm not concerned with that either, because I'm concerned with helping people right now, and that's what I'm doing. So unfortunately, we did lose a Sangha member of ours this past Sunday. He lost the battle to addiction, and so I've been kind of weathering that and grieving him for the past couple days, and it's kind of where I'm at right now.
So I'm sorry to hear that, and thank you so much for taking the time out, which I guess you could have done without. So thank you for coming on this in light of that. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry to hear that, and thank you for sharing that with us. And it's good to see another brother of this lineage, and the amazing things that you're doing. It really touches touches my heart, and me and Sujatu definitely. Any way we can help you, we're here to help you. And if you all that stuff, if you want to post that on any of our media platforms, definitely you can promote there. And I really look forward to working with you in the future, and introducing this wonderful practice to more people that might be able to utilize it in a positive way, so that they can improve their lives like it's helped us improve our lives and saved us from the grips and the depths that we've been, which I wouldn't wish upon anybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you both for everything that you're doing up there, because it's so needed. It's so needed, and that message just rings so much even more true now, in the light of losing a Sangha member and a friend in the past couple of days. And people are out there and they're suffering, and it's somebody's got to do something. So thank you both for what you do, and if there's anything that I can do for either of you, please don't hesitate to ask, because I will do anything in my power to help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
We both appreciate that. I think that there are folks out there that are trying to do what they can, and it's great when we actually get to sit and talk like this, and hopefully some other people get some, perhaps some other folks take some inspiration from it as well. I'd like to see some more. I'd like to see some more bigger organisations taking an interest in at least giving folks like us some support. So I'm going to get that in there. Well, I can see, because I've got the big clock in front of me, I can see we're kind of running out of time. I usually finish, Justin, by saying, is there anything you want to plug? I think you've probably covered everything.
I think so. Oh, and one thing I will plug is I also do a podcast. It's called Dharma Junkie. So if anybody's interested in that, and it covers different modalities of recovery and healing, and just ultimately just being our best selves. So I interview everyone from Buddhist teachers to Vedic astrologers and psychedelic advocates, and all these different modalities that seem to actually help people. And because there is no one path to recovery, and I also support a multimodal path. Whatever works for you. We can kind of Jeet Kune Do our recovery as much as we have to, and kind of take what works for us, and leave the rest. But it does take the work, and that's one thing that I do want to reiterate to people is, we can say that we are committed to this path, or we can say that we are committed to this modality or that modality, but at the end of the day, if you're not really putting the work in, then it's not going to benefit. It's more than just reading a couple books here and there. It does take the full-on approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I
Agreed.
think with that, that's probably a good place for us to end. Thank you so much for joining us, Justin. We really appreciate it. And I'll certainly be in contact with you soon. For I've been a bit slack with that, but I'll be in contact with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you.